Hey guys, tonight we wander into a place where the fog seems almost sentient, curling around gnarled trunks like fingers eager to pull you in, and you probably won't survive this. Well, at least not without a few jolts of nervous laughter. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious who's awake for these midnight strolls. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a narrow path at the edge of the haunted forest. The mist so thick it makes each step feel like walking through cotton candy, sticky and reluctant. The air smells faintly of damp earth and something older, something almost metallic. You swear you hear footsteps behind you, though each time you glance back, there's nothing but swaying branches. The forest has a way of teasing the senses, bending shadows into shapes that wink just out of clarity, shapes that make you question your own pulse. Rumors whisper that the forest has long been a marketplace for those willing to trade with things most living people cannot see. Historians still argue whether such haunted bazaars were ever literal locations or simply metaphorical warnings against greed. But standing here, staring at lanterns that float without fire, you are starting to lean toward the literal side. Lanterns bob gently in the fog, each seeming to mark a stall or table made of gnarled roots. The wood twists unnaturally as if it knows your fear and stretches just to tease you. You notice a sign carved into the bark. Curiosities await. Courage optional. The lettering shimmers faintly, shifting like liquid silver. You approach cautiously because you know that in these woods, curiosity and caution are uneasy companions. From a stall, a merchant emerges, wearing a hood so deep that no face can be seen. But somehow you can feel eyes examining you, weighing your intentions. It's unnerving but also thrilling, like opening a present that could contain either a treasure or a very loud ghost. The air vibrates slightly as coins rattle in invisible pockets, and you realize you're not entirely sure if you're expected to pay with currency, a secret, or a memory. Some merchants in history carried exotic goods across vast lands, silk, spices, or rare metals. But the merchant in front of you seems to deal in something far older. Essence, shadows, the intangible hum of things you cannot name. A fringe detail surfaces in your mind, perhaps overheard in a book long forgotten. Traders in medieval Europe sometimes claimed to sell the souls of the night for protection or luck. You laugh quietly, but the laugh dies in the mist. A sudden breeze carries a whisper, "Choose wisely." You shiver, but the fog wraps you in comfort, oddly protective, as if reminding you that for every chill, there is warmth nearby. You step closer to the stall, noting jars filled with swirling motes, fabrics that ripple as if alive, and tiny carvings that seem to twitch when looked at directly. Each item hums faintly, like the echoes of forgotten memories. You pick one up. It's a small orb, warm to the touch and faintly buzzing, almost like it contains a heartbeat. Historians still argue whether objects like this ever existed in reality or were exaggerated tales of superstition. But your fingers feel the undeniable pulse, and your curiosity outweighs doubt. As you move through the mist, you can't help but notice the path itself seems to rearrange, nudging you towards certain stalls while discouraging others. A subtle, playful presence is guiding your choices. The merchant bows slightly, extending a hand toward a peculiar set of keys, iron, twisted into impossible shapes. You sense these keys unlock more than doors, perhaps memories, perhaps doors in the mind, perhaps something else entirely. The air feels thick with expectation, and a gentle shiver runs down your spine. Remember that feeling. You'll recall it later when you're bargaining with shadows. The mist swirls tighter around your ankles, like the forest itself is curious, peeking at your every move. You hear a distant bell, not loud but resonant, vibrating through the soles of your feet. A fringe superstition claims that tolling bells in haunted woods mark crossroads between worlds, whether literal or symbolic. You feel it in your chest, a pull both thrilling and alarming. You tuck the keys into your coat, deciding to continue exploring, each step crunching softly on the damp leaves that smell faintly of honey and old parchment. A sudden gust lifts a ribbon of mist, revealing a table draped with velvet that glows faintly in moonlight, or maybe it's starlight reflecting off the fog. On it lie small boxes of unknown origin, one humming gently like a trapped bird. You reach to lift the lid, and your fingertips brush something warm and soft, almost sentient. You laugh nervously, realizing you just tried to pet a ghost. And maybe, just maybe, the forest appreciates that kind of humor. Time begins to feel strange. Minutes stretch and compress. Lanterns flicker in a rhythm that seems to mimic your heartbeat. The merchant leans slightly, tilting an unseen head as if to gauge your courage. Historians still argue whether humans were ever truly able to interact with spectral entities, or if all reports were embellishments. But standing here, feeling the warm pulse in that orb, you have to admit, reality is bending a little. You swallow, steady your breath, and step further into the misty bazaar, ready, or perhaps foolishly unaware, of what the night has in store. The deeper you step into the forest, the more it feels alive, as though the trees themselves lean in closer, rustling their leaves to murmur secrets meant only for you. A faint scent of damp pine mingles with something faintly sweet, like overripe berries fermenting underfoot. Every branch seems to twist just so, forming natural archways, guiding you along invisible paths. You brush against bark that is surprisingly warm, almost pulsing, like it carries a memory of every footstep ever taken here. Whispered voices curl through the fog, soft, unintelligible, but undeniably sentient. You shiver, partly from chill, partly from the thrill of being so vividly observed. At a crooked stall fashioned from roots and moss, you see items that make your imagination tilt. Glass vials with swirling mists trapped inside. Necklaces of stones that glow faintly like captured moonlight, and feathers that twitch when touched, as though annoyed by human curiosity. The merchant you noticed earlier gestures at them, hooded head tilting in a way that suggests amusement. You remember reading that medieval markets often had displays meant to attract attention through shock or wonder. Historians still argue whether some of the tales were literal or exaggerated, but this feels like the real deal, a living testament to that old human desire to be mesmerized. A soft voice calls your name, though you don't remember ever telling it aloud. You whirl, heart thudding, but no one is there. Instead, a small creature, barely taller than your knee, with eyes that glimmer like dewdrops, scuttles across the forest floor. It carries a tiny box, offering it to you before darting back into the mist. You open it to find a shard of mirror, perfectly smooth, reflecting not your face, but an older version of yourself, weary but strangely content. Fringe folklore holds that such mirrors can show paths you might have taken, or never will. But whether the tales are metaphor or reality remains hotly debated. You tuck it into your coat, feeling a thrill of danger and curiosity simultaneously. The merchant steps closer, placing a hand on the edge of a table. You notice that when he does, the table seems to ripple slightly, like liquid oak. Coins levitate, hovering in the air as though waiting for invisible hands to grab them. "You'll need the right kind of payment," the voice from beneath the hood murmurs. You glance down, realizing that your purse contains not only coins, but scraps of paper, trinkets, and even a pressed flower you found days ago. Could any of these suffice for a transaction where normal currency is meaningless? You recall that in some cultures, trade involved stories, secrets, or favors instead of money. Historians still argue whether those practices were symbolic or practical, but here it certainly feels practical. You move on to another stall where jars emit faint chimes when touched, like tiny bells inside. One jar in particular hums a low, haunting tune that resonates in your chest. You lift it gently, and a cold whisper coils around your arm. Remember your choices. A quirky detail from old tales surfaces. Some merchants in haunted woods supposedly offered items that adjusted the owner's luck, but at the cost of a memory or an emotion. You frown, realizing that the whimsical sound of the chime now carries a weight you hadn't anticipated. The forest seems to watch, and maybe even approve, your contemplation. Suddenly, a group of faint, shimmering figures appears among the trees. They move slowly, their forms like smoke twisted into human shapes. Yet there is a distinctness to their gestures. You freeze, recalling that ghostly apparitions in folklore were often described as mirrors of past trades or unresolved business. Historians still argue whether these accounts are metaphors for memory or literal observations, but the figures drift closer, whispering unintelligible words. One of them touches a hanging charm, causing it to vibrate and emit a soft, phosphorescent glow. You realize that the spirits aren't hostile, they are participants, observers, and perhaps even customers. As you navigate between stalls, a thin fog curls around your ankles, carrying with it the faint scent of ink and wax. Each step seems to echo faintly, and for a moment you swear the forest is echoing your heartbeat in rhythm. You notice another merchant, a small figure hunched over a table, painstakingly carving tiny figurines from roots and bones. The carvings twitch slightly when he places them down, and you laugh softly, shaking your head. You've read about Japanese tsukumogami, objects said to gain life after a century of use. Fringe historians suggest that this might be a universal human concept, but seeing it here in a misty forest market gives you pause. You pause at a table covered in folded maps. Each map is unique. Some show the forest as it exists now, while others depict impossible pathways and destinations that seem to float outside known reality. You pick one up. It trembles in your hand, revealing new lines and symbols that vanish the moment you blink. A soft whisper accompanies it. Paths chosen, paths avoided. You marvel at the intricacy and feel a mild pang of awe. It reminds you of tales where traders in ancient bazaars exchanged knowledge or locations in lieu of goods, a practice that historians still debate whether it truly occurred or exists only in allegory. Time becomes fluid. Lanterns float past, casting dappled light on routes that seem to move as you pass. The air hums with possibility, anticipation, and the faint thrill of danger. You realize the forest isn't simply a location. It is a participant, alive with attention, guiding your steps, nudging you toward items that resonate with your curiosity. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of laughter echoes, light, playful, yet undeniably otherworldly. You take a deep breath, preparing to engage further with the spectral customers and the arcane bargains waiting ahead. Phantom shapes drift closer now, each one gliding as if weightless over the damp forest floor. You notice they aren't menacing, at least not yet, but they are utterly peculiar. One has the faint shimmer of a misty outline, while another seems composed entirely of fragmented light. Their eyes, or the vague impressions where eyes should be, follow you carefully, evaluating. You remember the old stories. Haunted forest merchants were said to attract customers from both the living and the spectral planes. Historians still argue whether the ghosts were witnesses, traders, or simply metaphors for human fear. But standing here, surrounded by drifting figures, you can't help but feel observed on multiple levels. A particularly bold phantom approaches, translucent fingers reaching toward a small trinket in your pocket. You pull it out, a tiny carved fox, its eyes glinting in the dim light. The ghost nods, or does a gesture that feels like a nod, and reaches out to swap something. A shard of faintly glowing crystal materializes in its hand, hovering for a moment before it hands it to you. You take it gingerly. Fringe accounts suggest that spectral trades might carry lingering effects, like dreams or memories being altered. But whether that is poetic license or reality is still debated. Either way, your curiosity tingles with cautious excitement. As you continue walking, the air thickens with whispers. They don't form words you can recognize, but feel oddly like suggestions, nudging your attention to certain objects, certain stalls. You glance at a twisted table made of intertwining roots, where a small lantern floats above a pile of coins. When you reach out, the coins hover and rearrange themselves into a symbol, glowing faintly before resuming their random positions. You laugh softly, shaking your head at the absurdity. You recall stories of medieval merchants using secret symbols to communicate deals or warnings. Historians still argue whether they were practical or purely ritual. But here, it feels intuitive and alive. One phantom drifts closer, wearing a cloak that seems to ripple between shadows and light. It gestures toward a small pouch, dangling from a branch by a thin silver thread. You lift the pouch carefully, noting that inside are tiny bones etched with runes. A sudden shiver runs down your spine. Fringe lore holds that such runes could contain protective charms or curses, but no one truly knows their potency. You tuck them into your coat, deciding that curiosity outweighs caution, at least for now. Nearby, a figure that seems part mist and part flickering flame flits across a stall, rearranging jars of humming motes. You watch in fascination as one jar rises, spins gently, and lands with a soft thud, perfectly aligned with the others. The merchant from the first stall nods faintly at you, perhaps acknowledging your growing skill in navigating this bizarre bazaar. A historical fact floats to the surface of your memory. Medieval fairs often had elaborate performances meant to distract, amuse, or challenge buyers. But you are witnessing a literal spectral performance, interactive and unpredictable. You step toward a table laden with intricately carved boxes, each etched with scenes of forest spirits and long-lost creatures. One box trembles faintly, calling to you. When you open it, you find a tiny map showing the forest not as it is, but as it might have been centuries ago. Whispers swirl around it. Paths remembered, paths forgotten. Fringe historians claim that such maps could be magical, showing not just geography but potentiality, though whether that is literal or allegorical is hotly debated. You tuck it carefully into your bag, realizing that every item here has weight, meaning, and unseen consequences. Suddenly, the ghostly customers begin forming a loose circle around a particularly twisted tree. You approach cautiously, noticing that the bark is covered with etchings, ancient runes, diagrams, and tiny scenes frozen in wood. The figures hover, whispering, and one reaches forward to touch a rune. The symbol glows faintly, and you feel a jolt of understanding, like a puzzle piece snapping into place. A quirky bit of folklore surfaces. Some believe that trees in haunted forests can store memories of transactions, experiences, or even emotions. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic storytelling or a belief in literal memory trees. You nod internally, sensing that the forest itself is recording your actions. You hear a soft chime, almost musical, drifting from deeper in the forest. Following it, you come upon a phantom haggler, juggling small orbs of light that float and spin in midair. The spectral being offers you one in exchange for a small secret, whispered into the night. You hesitate, then murmur something trivial but personal. The orb glows warmly, and when you hold it, you swear you feel a faint sense of reassurance, as if the forest itself is approving of your choice. Fringe tales suggest these exchanges can bond the living and spectral worlds subtly, leaving tiny imprints on both. But historians remain divided on whether the bonds were meant metaphorically or magically. As you wander through the clearing, another ghost approaches, carrying a delicate figurine, a tiny, twisted creature with gleaming eyes. It places the figurine in your hand, as if granting a gift for your bravery, then fades back into the mist. You laugh softly, muttering, "I hope it doesn't eat my shoes." The whimsical absurdity reminds you that even in haunted places, humor persists, a human need to lighten tension. Lanterns bob gently around you, casting shadows that stretch and curl like playful cats. You notice a ledger on a stump, bound in something dark and smooth. Opening it, you glimpse entries that shimmer as if alive. Trades recorded in invisible ink, deals between beings both human and not. Your stomach tightens slightly. The forest seems to hum in anticipation. A historical fact floats into your thoughts. Merchants often kept meticulous ledgers, but here it seems the ledger itself is sentient. You feel the weight of its gaze, of countless transactions unfolding across time. You wonder, what price will this forest demand, and are you ready to pay it? The ledger feels heavy in your hands, though it weighs almost nothing. Its leather cover pulses subtly like a heartbeat out of sync with your own. As you flip through the pages, the entries writhe, words shimmering in the fog. Names appear, some familiar, some foreign, some you swear are invented just to unnerve you. Each line seems to hum with significance, and a chill creeps up your spine. Fringe accounts claim that such ledgers could bind a person to a fate or agreement without their conscious consent, though historians still argue whether these were metaphors for debt or literal contracts of the supernatural. You hesitate, wondering if curiosity is finally about to cost more than your pulse can handle. One particular entry draws your eye, a transaction involving a merchant, a ghost, and something called the Evershade Orb. The details are cryptic, listing symbols, shapes, and quantities you barely recognize. You feel the ledger shift in your hands as though nudging you closer to understanding, or perhaps warning you away. A faint whisper curls around your ears. Some trades are heavier than gold. The idea is bizarre, but your fingers tighten around the orb you collected earlier. Could it be tied to this contract? You swallow hard, recalling that medieval merchants sometimes wove moral lessons into their agreements. Historians still debate whether the lessons were intended literally, spiritually, or as allegory. But here, the weight feels all too real. Suddenly, the fog thickens around you, coiling like a protective serpent. From its folds, shadowy forms emerge. The very phantoms you saw before now circling with more purpose. They gesture toward the ledger, then toward you, their movements deliberate. You feel a pull, not forceful but insistent, guiding you to read aloud the strange phrases. A tingle runs down your arm as the words leave your lips. The ink seems to shimmer brighter, reacting to your voice. Fringe stories suggest that speaking aloud the contracts binds the speaker more tightly, but whether this is psychological suggestion or actual magic is disputed among scholars. You feel the tension tighten, a web slowly spinning around you. A flicker of light catches your attention, an orb levitating beside the ledger, responding to your voice. It pulses faintly, almost like a heartbeat of its own. You reach out and it darts toward your chest, embedding a small warmth just above your heart. The sensation is soothing yet alarming, as if the forest acknowledges your presence and simultaneously tests your resolve. You recall tales of talismans granted in spectral markets, objects that could protect, warn, or curse depending on intent and interaction. Historians still argue whether these were moral fables or genuine artifacts of belief, but your fingers now hold the undeniable weight of potentiality. A sudden clatter from nearby startles you. You look up and see a phantom merchant dropping small coins into the mist. Each coin lands on the ground with a muted chime, arranging itself into a symbol you've seen in the ledger. A chill crawls along your spine. You remember reading about talismanic writing in medieval trading. Symbols meant to invoke luck, protection, or occasionally a curse. Fringe accounts claim that some traders believed these could manipulate reality itself. You glance at the Evershade orb in your pocket. The coin's formation seems to interact with it. The forest feels alive around you, trees leaning in, roots subtly shifting. It's as if the entire space conspires to test your judgment. The ledger seems to sense your hesitation, opening to another page depicting a trade that went awry, a merchant overreached, and a forest spirit, described as a trickster, reclaimed their due. The tale is ambiguous, leaving the consequences both terrifying and fascinating. Historians still debate whether these cautionary accounts reflect historical events or are purely allegorical, but standing here, you feel a flicker of fear and a glimmer of exhilaration. You take a deep breath and consider your options. Do you leave the ledger be, risk the whisper's insistence, or attempt a trade to satisfy the forest's cryptic demands? The Evershade orb hums faintly, a reminder that some choices will bind you more than others. You open your coat and spread the items you've gathered: the mirror shard, the glowing crystal, the tiny map, and the etched bones. The spectral figures lean closer, their forms flickering like candlelight. One reaches toward the map, brushing its intangible fingers over the symbols. The lines glow faintly, showing potential pathways you hadn't considered. Fringe folklore suggests that spirit interaction can reveal hidden truths, but whether those truths are objective or interpretive remains a point of debate. Finally, you realize that the forest, the ledger, and the phantoms all converge at this point, a nexus of choice, risk, and subtle negotiation. The whispers intensify, urging you to make a decision. You place one item, your shard of mirror, on the ledger. The book absorbs its presence, shimmering and settling. The orb reacts, pulsing in tandem with your heartbeat. The phantoms murmur softly, a blend of disapproval, encouragement, and something almost like admiration. You feel both a weight and a lightness, understanding that your decision has consequences, though their full nature is yet unseen. Every step now carries gravity. The mist curls tighter, drawing you toward the forest's heart. You tuck the ledger under one arm, the orb secure in the other, feeling a peculiar kinship with the spectral observers. The haunted forest isn't merely a backdrop. It's an active participant, alive with judgment, curiosity, and memory. You remind yourself to breathe, to keep your wits, and to trust in your instincts, knowing that your choices here may echo far beyond this night. The haunted trails ahead are uncertain, but for the first time, you feel prepared to navigate them. The mist thickens as you step forward, weaving around your legs like gentle fingers reluctant to let you go. Each breath tastes faintly of moss and stone, and you can hear the subtle hum of the forest. Almost musical, almost mischievous. You glance at the path ahead, twisted roots, uneven stones, and lanterns flickering faintly, suspended in mid-air as if held by invisible hands. The forest seems to test your resolve, nudging you toward one route while whispering faintly from the shadows, urging caution in another. Every step feels deliberate, as though the path itself remembers past travelers, their successes and mistakes. Fringe accounts of living forests suggest that the woods can sense intention, but whether these are metaphors or literal observations is a matter historians still debate. You step cautiously over a gnarled root, brushing past a hanging cluster of glowing moss. A phantom figure drifts beside you, translucent and calm, extending a hand as if to guide you. You hesitate but reach toward it, your fingers brush against cool, intangible skin, and the figure bends slightly, tilting in approval. You remember a tale about spirit guides in haunted markets, said to offer help only to those deemed worthy. Scholars still argue whether these were moral allegories or reported experiences, but here the sensation feels entirely real. A sudden rustle catches your attention. Lanterns sway above, casting shadows that twist into shapes reminiscent of past trades. A soft voice whispers, choices echo longer than footsteps. You glance at the ledger tucked under your arm. The Evershade orb hums faintly, its warmth pressing subtly against your chest. You feel a strange reassurance. The forest isn't only a place of danger. It has a rhythm, a cadence, a subtle fairness that rewards careful attention and courage. The tiny map you gathered earlier shows a path twisting in impossible angles, yet somehow you trust your feet to follow its subtle guidance. Roots twist and curl underfoot, forming near impenetrable tangles in some areas. You carefully step over them, noting that each obstacle seems almost playful in its design, like the forest is challenging your agility, your patience, and your wit. You remember laughing at a previous stall when a jar of humming motes almost danced out of your hands. Humor persists here, even in the shadows. Fringe folklore suggests that such forest tests were meant to prepare the traveler for higher understanding. Historians debate whether the trials were real experiences or instructive myths. You find yourself silently thanking the forest for its strange, whimsical guidance. Up ahead, a spectral bridge arcs over a narrow ravine. The wood flickers in and out of visibility, supported by nothing you can see. You step onto it cautiously. The plank beneath your feet hums with energy, almost like it senses hesitation. Ghostly hands reach from the fog, pointing, nudging, or perhaps merely observing. You recall tales of phantom bridges in haunted forests. Some say crossing them is a rite of passage. Others insist that missteps invite eternal wandering. Scholars still argue over whether these stories were symbolic warnings or rooted in literal accounts. But each step you take is undeniably thrilling. Midway across, trickster spirits emerge, swirling in playful arcs around you. They toss illusions, shadows that mimic your form, whispers that echo doubts, but they laugh softly when you manage to step in rhythm with the bridge. Their mischief is harmless, yet unnerving, reminding you that the forest values both courage and cleverness. You recall a fringe belief that trickster spirits test the moral fiber of those who enter their domain. Historians still debate whether these myths served as moral instruction or exaggerated warnings, but the experience is undeniably entertaining. You reach the far side and pause, noticing a final clearing before the forest seems to loosen its hold. Lanterns flicker faintly, the mist thins, and the air smells less of earth and more of morning dew. Here, the spectral figures gather, forming a quiet audience. The ledger, the orb, the map, and the other curiosities you carry seem to resonate with the clearing, almost like instruments in a symphony. You place a hand on the Evershade orb, feeling its warmth settle, acknowledging your choices, your courage, and your curiosity. A soft, approving hum drifts from the trees. You realize that the forest doesn't punish recklessness in the same way it rewards attentiveness. It challenges, teases, and guides. Every step you took, the bargains, the whispers, the ghostly exchanges, led here to a moment of quiet triumph. You feel a subtle relief, almost as if you've been permitted to leave with your essence intact, carrying knowledge and curiosities few would ever witness. Fringe tales insist that the forest may remember your presence, even long after departure, though historians remain divided on whether this is metaphorical or literal. The final stretch is easy now, almost anticlimactic. You notice sunlight, or what passes for early morning glow, filtering through the upper branches. The mist loosens, the lanterns dim, and you step onto the forest edge. Your feet sink slightly into dew-damp grass, and the whispering voices fade, leaving only a faint echo in your memory. You glance back once. The forest looms, inscrutable, alive, yet strangely benevolent. A soft smile crosses your face, a mixture of exhaustion, wonder, and relief. You have survived, and you have stories to carry. The forest recedes behind you, like a memory dissolving into dawn. Each step feels lighter now, the weight of fog and whispering shadows lifting slowly, as if the trees themselves are nodding in farewell. You notice the cool breeze brushing your cheeks, carrying the faint scent of pine and wildflowers, mingling with the faint hum of the distant river. Your heartbeat slows, settling into a calm rhythm, and your lungs fill with air that smells of possibility and quiet reassurance. The items you carry, the Evershade orb, the ledger, the tiny map, and the curious trinkets, seem to pulse faintly in harmony with your own breath, gentle reminders of the night's strange encounters. You pause on a slight hill, watching the first rays of sun filter through the remaining mist. The light glances off dewdrops, sparkling like scattered gems across the grass. Your eyes soften, and you allow yourself a small, wry smile at the absurdity of having conversed with shadows, negotiated with phantoms, and navigated a marketplace that defied reason. Even the trickster spirits seem to linger in memory rather than in presence, leaving only a faint echo of laughter that warms rather than unnerves. You feel a curious sense of camaraderie with the unseen entities, a silent acknowledgement that you played the game well. Each breath you take now feels lighter, infused with relief and gentle wonder. You run your fingers over the Evershade orb, its warmth a reminder of courage faced and choices made. The ledger's pages lie dormant under your arm, no longer humming with impatience. You realize that the forest may have been testing more than your bravery. It tested your patience, curiosity, and respect for the unknown. And though you walked among spectral merchants and peculiar artifacts, you carry away not fear, but a calm knowledge that even in haunted places, careful attention, a playful mind, and a courageous heart can guide you safely. The world beyond the trees calls softly, the forest edge now a liminal space between mystery and reality. You let your shoulders relax, feeling a lightness as though the air itself congratulates your perseverance. Footsteps on soft grass, the distant call of a morning bird, and the rustle of wind through leaves combine into a lullaby of reassurance. The night's thrills and chills now fade, leaving only gentle memories, delicate and manageable, like a story whispered in your ear long after the storyteller has gone. Slowly, you take the final steps into open ground, each one measured, savoring the sensation of solid earth beneath your feet. The fog thins completely, sunlight warming your face, and the forest becomes a silent silhouette behind you. You glance at the items you've carried, knowing each one is a talisman of experience, curiosity, and courage. The misty whispers are gone, replaced by the soft chorus of day, but you carry their lessons in quiet assurance. You inhale deeply once more, exhale slowly, and allow the calm to settle fully, a gentle echo of the night's adventure lingering in your chest. And as you walk forward, leaving the haunted woods behind, you feel the comforting rhythm of the world returning, each step slow, deliberate, and peaceful.